Welcome everyone here. I call this special council meeting to order. And for those of you, I'm sure you're all aware of the purpose of this meeting. We are going to be applying for a grant to complete Station House. Commission staff to give us additional information on the anticipated costs. We directed them to not be conservative with the numbers, because when you apply for a grant, you can't go up once you apply for a figure, so it's better to have a safety margin in there than not. Mr. Dickin has been working with Mr. Forlowski and putting together some additional information so that we're able to contemplate this further.
Your Worship, did you want to follow the agenda just for practice sake by having an approval for the agenda?
I was assuming no one would be objecting.
We just have to do that. So
okay, why not? Why not? Let's follow that. Is anyone objecting to the agenda? Okay.
Second.
Second. Okay, all those in favor? Okay. Now, I don't know if you're going to be fighting to present this, Mr. Dickin, Mr. Forlowski?
Well, we arm wrestled earlier and I wanted So you've got with you as part of your agenda the draft road building grant application. It's in draft form, waiting for the decisions that come up tonight. And you've also got the preliminary construction budget report prepared by Kale Quantity Surveying. The summary for the costs, the estimated costs for the project are on page 6. Mr. Kale has calculated the cost to do the entire project in one shot at $928,413. On the following page, I had him do some optional pricing for council so that council could make some choices here should they wish. There was talk of having a woodwork, one of the tenants, possibly, one of the possible tenants, involving woodwork and solvents and paints, etc. And for that to occur in the basement, there would need to be a ventilation system. And that ventilation system has an order of magnitude cost of $38,520. So that's an optional cost that could be done now, could be done later. Price number 2 that he's added in there was a new staircase to the upper floor. Should council wish to use that upper floor, there's the option there of just leaving it as an attic, but should council decide that that's potential office space up there, the cost associated with that is in the neighborhood of $90,000 actually, to include a new staircase and the renovation of the upstairs floor. So when you start adding all these numbers up, if you wanted to include the ventilation and the upstairs floor, that brings the total project price up to $1,056,291. Now, Mr. Kale also did present some recommendations on page 6, and I did speak to him tonight for some further clarification on his recommendations. So there's 2 ways of moving forward should council choose that they want to go forward with the price, with the project as priced here. One way would be to have an architect do up drawings, put the project out to tender, have contractors bid on that project based on the drawings, and have those contractors perform the work. The other option, and this is an option that Mr. Kale recommended, for a renovation project of an old building such as Station House, is that you have an architect do up the drawings, but you have a construction manager manage the project and organize the sub-trades, and that construction manager would then have the sub-trades provide bids based on the drawings. Now there's reasons why he recommended that route moving forward, is that with a building such as Station House, when you start getting into it, there may be some surprises, let's say. And if you go the tender route, contractors will bid based on the drawings and only the drawings. And when you run into extras, you'll be hit up with multiple change orders, and that can get costly over time. Whereas if you have a project manager that is experienced at construction, they can sometimes get ahead of these unknowns, and you can reduce costs using a manager to run the project more smoothly. Otherwise, you're relying on the contractor doing the work, who may not be acting on your behalf as much as a project manager would. So the project manager would be an extension of the district that was hired to make sure that the project is accomplished with the district's bottom line in mind. So that's a summary of the report. I did also do a quick calculation on the costs of a architect for this project. I used the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada tables, and I used the percentage of construction cost method of deriving the architect fee, and I calculated it at 10% of the total project cost, which would be a little over $100,000 for the architect. Now, I did run this by Mr. Kale, and he agreed with that figure. So should council want to move forward with an architect, it will be in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $110,000 over and above. And that's the summary of the report.
Well, I think we'll have lots of questions from council here, so we will take on any questions.
What did this, what was the fee to this contractor that wrote up this? What did it cost us?
$7,000.
How much?
$7,000.
7,000. And on, under 3.2, it says, based on the current design, state of design and development, we would recommend if the project proceeds further to a complete design, a design to be completed prior to tendering. Didn't the council ask for an architect drawing of this, and you guys went and did this other option?
No, to clarify the process, at the last meeting, it was clearly identified that to qualify for the timelines of the grant, we would not have time to commission an architect and get it done in time.
Well, just a second. If you look up and find out what this, what's it called, quantity surveyor does, the quantity surveyor does not do accurate feeding for projects like this, for any project. They do not do that. That's not even in their agenda. He did it for us. I phoned yesterday, when I got this, I phoned yesterday to a contractor, a reliable contractor, and asked him. He said, this is not the way you proceed. Where are you proceeding? Why do we even get this quantity survey? It's just another backroom door to waste a lot more money. These guys will charge up to from 6 to 10% if they were to proceed with this. And they don't even have the drawings. We don't have drawings now. How are you going to get numbers? These are just estimates. If you look at it, it says preliminary drawings, preliminary construction budget. That doesn't mean it's a construction budget. We don't get construction budgets until we get an architect drawing and bids off that drawing. That's why we've been going in circles for a year on this project. It's because we're not doing things the way they should be done. Anybody that's in construction, if you'd have talked to anybody, if we'd have started this project day one and said, well, how do we deal with this project, and phone the contractor would have number one said, hire an architect. That's the way we do. We don't get people giving little bids here and taking people that don't have experience and taking that advice. You go to the people who have the experience and get that advice. And that's where we've gone wrong. And we're still going wrong. We got this quantity surveyor. We spent $7,000 and we got nothing. This is a preliminary budget. This budget isn't accurate. I can tell you many spots in there that's not accurate. It's just preliminary. These guys do not do accurate budgeting.
Okay, Mr. Biggin.
Well, this particular quantity surveyor, I mean, he is a registered quantity surveyor, but he also owns a construction company. He's actively involved in multiple projects in the Lower Mainland, and he does have the ability to determine accurate construction costs based on current costs. He does have that benefit because he's also a contractor, and he's not just solely a quantity surveyor. You are right. some quantity surveyors have to phone contractors to get accurate pricing, but this quantity surveyor here is actively involved in projects. He knows the cost of doing business per se, and I have faith in his numbers that he's put forward in this report. The reason why we went to the quantity survey report is to meet the timeline of the grant. We need to provide information to the granting authority based on the scope of the project and what the proposed costs were going to be. We only had time to accomplish this, and at that we had to, basically expedite the process. Normally it would take longer.
Well, all I'm saying is, if I were looking at the grant and I saw a quantity survey giving a preliminary construction budget for this project, the grant would be nullified right now. This isn't a budget that we need. We have not taken time to even describe what we want at that building. We're just dreaming again. We haven't sat down and said, what do we actually need as council? That is a district, a whole building. It's not somebody else's building, it's our building. And we haven't had the time to do that. And by pushing it, doing this, we just wasted $7,000 or $8,000 or whatever. Because this budget isn't accurate, I can tell you that. If we got an actual architect drawing done, which shows where everything is supposed to be, then you can get accurate budgeting. Then you can get people to do the accurate bidding and we get an accurate budget. Otherwise, we're just dreaming again.
Your worship, thank you, Councillor Erickson. That option still remains the council, quite frankly. I mean, we can still go to surveyor, consult with the public and the stakeholders and spend roughly $100,000 to get the final drawings to make sure as precisely as possible things are covered off. But we will forego this round of grant application. As a staff, obviously that's your decision. And then we can hope to, if you so decide, apply for the next round if it's possible.
Okay. And I think, speaking to your point, Councillor Erickson, because an architect would take months, a couple of months, given the backlog of work that most firms have at this time due to very busy construction industry activity, this was really the only option to qualify for the grant. We could have obviously sat it out, but it was at the last meeting where the majority felt it was not a good idea to sit it out, that we should put the best package together, given the tight timelines. And then obviously as the process unfolds, we have the opportunity to get the precise figures. Council is also, I think, fairly articulate in the sense that we didn't want super conservative, super low figures, because when you apply for a grant, the last thing you want to do is under-apply, because you cannot reapply if things go beyond the submitted grant budget figures. So,
Can I just
yeah.
one more time? Thanks. Through again. If we were to spend, just say $1 million, because that's the numbers 925 or 35 to 1.1 or 1 some million. We could go build, I talked to a contractor yesterday, we could go build that exact building on that exact site for $400,000 less, $300,000 to $400,000 less, a brand new building, moved over to the property line, new concrete, new everything for less money. It's 100%. It's 100%. Just all you have to do is talk to a contractor and say, how much a square foot are you going to build a building for? And they will say 200 to 225, 250 would give you an excellent Cadillac building. And that's brand new. That's everything straight and no rot in it. Everything's brand new. And to the actual standards that we need for this day and age. And that's a simple number. And it's an accurate number.
Mr. Dickin and then Councillor Diamond. Okay, Councillor Diamond.
Good, thank you, through you. I suppose I ask myself two questions. One being, do we want the Station House project to go forward? And if the answer is yes, then I suppose we say, how do we go about doing that? And if we say no, then it's a fairly short meeting tonight. So I guess that's the question. Do we want the Station House project to go forward? And if we do, then we need to decide the way forward on this. And yes, the deadline for application is tomorrow for the rural dividend funds. There is a second round, which is in the fall. We may or may not be successful in that round. It might buy us some time to do what we need to do. Regardless, it's an expensive venture, but there was will of council, previous council, and this council to do something at that location, being that it's the junction of 3 highways. So I believe that it can showcase the community if we decide on the way forward on how we want to do this. But I guess that's the discussion at the table. Do we want it to go forward, or do we not want it to go forward?
Well, I think that, personally, I think that discussion's already taken place. We've decided we're moving forward. We just have to decide how best to move forward. The Advantage Hope Group did a good job kicking it off. And what's the big plus now is that a lot of the interior challenges are exposed, because, you know, there's the interior envelope is exposed, so that when we get prices for the finishing work, it's pretty easy to estimate what's required. So that's very in your face as far as estimating costs is concerned. And we're obviously not going to go gung-ho, move ahead on this if we don't get the grant. We'll have to maybe explore the phased approach again and look at a more bargain basement kind of approach. But there is an opportunity here. There's also a good opportunity if the Kinder Morgan project goes through. We have a guaranteed $500,000 that can be invested in this project. That's confirmed in writing. And that is something, obviously, that's not in the bag till the end of the year, but it definitely looks like the project is reasonably certain that it'll go ahead. So that's an additional shot into the wallet. So at this point, we're just pursuing the grant. There's no, we're going to spend this money regardless of getting the grant or not. So I think that's really the discussion. Are we in favor of submitting a grant application to explore the opportunities of getting the dividends fund for our community? And obviously this is a kind of project that helps the entire region, because we don't only give out information on Hope, it's information on the whole province and the region. So there's huge regional benefit to having a well put together tourist info center museum. So, additional comments from council? Yes, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Podolsky, I just have a question to pursue the higher number for the grant application. Will we require more budgeted funds to come forward, or are we good with the budgeted amount that we have?
With the figures provided, that Mr. Dickens provided with the surveyor, our portion of it, as laid out here, will involve some extra money. And of course, you need to discuss about options, because as he's just stated, it doesn't include the top floor. So perhaps, maybe you could clarify that again for Council, Kevin, and then they can move on with the discussion.
So the final figure, if council was to go for all options of the project, to include the ventilation in the basement for future tenancy, as well as renovation of the top floor, there would be a funding shortfall of approximately $300,000.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, can the public talk or ask questions?
Yeah, at the end, yeah, well, for sure. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Smith?
If we were successful in the full grant, or successful with the grant, is it a tiered granting application? Like, if we apply for the full 500,000, will they tier back and say, you know what, we're only going to give you 300,000? Are we looking at that kind of option that could happen in this situation too? Or is it all or nothing with them?
They could potentially do that, because if there are other applications going in from other entities involved, they may decide to allocate funding to those applications as well, so it's a possibility.
Okay. Councillor Pratt?
So, through you, thank you, is it, the 300,000 shortfall, is that including the engineer, the architect to do the drawings, the 150,000 if we say we're at the high end of this grant application?
No, the architect fee would be on top of that.
So we're looking at least minimum another 100,000 for that. So now that's 400,000 more. And when we started out this fine little project, we started out with allocating $114,000 to this project. So to say that I'm disappointed is probably an understatement. I think that we're still, I don't know if we're a divided council or not, but it feels that way because we're still not on the same page. I, like Councillor Erickson, feel that we should have a drawing, an architectural drawing to look at, to discuss, to decide if this is the Cadillac version that we're applying for here or not. Right now, I'm just going to a car dealer and saying, here's $1 million, give me what you got. And I don't really know if that's really what we want. I think that we need to be kind of the leaders here, controlling what we want, and I don't really see that happening and all on the same page at least. So I'm not happy about that. I'm not really pleased about how all this money is just going up and up and up. I want something, as far as the station house is concerned, that to me has been a dream for a long time. I've thought it was wonderful. I think it's a fantastic situation. We're kind of halfway there. We've got the property. Staff did a good job on that part, and I'm pleased about that. I'm very unhappy about the way the project's unfolding. I don't know where we're going sideways here, but clearly we've got money budgeted in our budget that we beat around the bush a million times, and now we're even exceeding that. And I'm not in favor of that. I'm sorry. You've got to cap it somewhere, and this is not going to happen.
Well, I think this is exploratory. At the last council meeting, we clearly directed staff to do the best they could to research the figures, to get us the most accurate figures possible given the tight timelines. This is not a case of staff running away with a budget. This is a case of exploring options. We still have the option of doing this in a phased approach and doing it in a very budget-oriented fashion, but you know, that's still an option for council if the grant is not successful. I'm personally in favor of applying for the grant and having options open for the community. That's my personal opinion, because ultimately, if we can tender the whole works or get a project manager, we're not going to burn out our volunteers. We're going to have a project finished a lot quicker, and we also have some lands available for resale at that point that will backfill, and the aforementioned Kinder Morgan contribution will offset that as well if that project moves ahead. So it's not as daunting a project as one might think. Councillor Dival.
Right, so I just want to go back into my memory bank. And if I remember, previous council, we felt that this was a good option to go forward with a phased approach. We were just coming off the heels of the community park project where we had leveraged volunteer participation to work towards achieving a very lofty goal for the community that had a large dollar value attached to it. We were able to leverage community volunteer hours to help get us to a further place in that park. So if I remember correctly, the phased approach was $114,000, if I'm remembering correctly. So correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Medlock and Councillor Thought. So the $114,000 was the first phase of the structural piece of it. The structural piece, first phase, has been completed to date. My understanding is we spent $166,000 towards the station house to date. So for us to go into this next phase, which is a final completion, I'm just wondering, so that's the little history part of it, if I'm remembering correctly, just to remind folks of where we were at. If we go forward with the grant, simultaneously, can we then, or should we be seeking an architect to do up the drawings at the same time? And then, if we are successful with the grant, we have the drawings, and then we can go out to tender on it. Or we still have, if we're not successful in the grant, we still have the architect design and know what it is that we're dealing with. Is that how I'm envisioning that process to undertake correctly. And if we do get the grant, if we all of a sudden decide, well, we want to put the brakes on for whatever reason, because, you know, things change, and if anything's predictable, it's change. If we do decide, we don't actually have to go through with the grant. If all of a sudden we decide, no, we're not interested, for whatever reason, is that correct? We're successful in getting the grant, and we all of a sudden decide we don't want to put out this $300,000.
The process that you laid out regarding the architect, doing the drawings up while the grant application is being considered would be one that staff would certainly support, and one that we would envision. However, if the district were to apply to the granting authority for a certain scope of work, it would be expected that should we be successful in obtaining that grant, that we actually undertake and complete that work.
Okay, Councillor Erickson.
So, this is, what's the square footage of that building?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
We don't know the square footage. We don't know the square
I'm
footage
sure it's in the document, but off the
It's
top
in the
of my head.
document
5,012.
on the top floor.
Building area says 5,000.
Is that both floors?
No.
Top and bottom is about 6,000 square feet.
Top and bottom, so 3,000. Okay, that's exactly what I figured. I measured roughly about 3,000 square feet, just as my ballpark. I'm surprised we don't know that. Let's count this. Okay, so 3,000 square feet. If you divide 3,000 square feet
No,
into $1 million.
6,000, top is 3, bottom is 3, roughly.
Yeah, but you don't count the basement as a.
You asked
in a
total
project.
square footage, that's what I'm telling you,
Okay,
6,000
so
square feet.
I'm just talking about if you're gonna get a price from a contractor to build a new building, and he would give you a ballpark. So he would take the average square footage of the top floor of the building, and the basement would be basically empty. And he would say it's gonna cost roughly say $250 square foot for a Cadillac building. How much is that gonna cost? Can someone figure that out? If you take three, how much? 3,000 square feet into $1 million.
Go into $1 million?
Yeah.
Per square footage,
To tell how much it's gonna cost per square footage. I didn't have time to figure it out.
I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
the report here shows the number that he's figured everything out based on cost per square foot was 5,012 square feet. And his figure of 928 works out to $185 a square foot. He's got that in black and white.
185.
It's about 370.
No, it's gotta be $300.
Well, it's
It's $333,000 or $333.
333.
Okay, so if we're going by his numbers, I'm just trying to point out a thing. His numbers in the book, I read all that, but I'm just asking the question to see if everybody else, he did about approximately $200 a square foot, ballpark. But that excluded floor finishing in the basement, exhaust system, building permits, building risk insurance, hazardous materials, testing and abatement, a whole bunch of things, landscape and renovation of the upper attic, structural upgrade. Excluded all that. And now we've got $333 a square foot, which is outrageous for this building. That's why these numbers are wrong. They're 100% wrong. And for us to go to a person like him to get us numbers is really troubling to me, very troubling. When in his manual it says roughly $200 a square foot, which is a reasonable amount, to build a brand new building. And then we'd have everything, including roof, everything.
We've got a few members of the public that are interested in
We've had lots of time to think about this since our last meeting on the topic, and I've done lots of thinking since then. I keep trying to figure out how we got to where we're at here. When the whole original
Sort of.
was to move from one old building into another old building, and it could have been that simple. I think it was a matter of getting some exit signs put up in the station house. We could have been in there operating. But we wanted to make sure, through lots of questions from the public and from council, that we had, we wanted to make sure we owned the land, that the building was safe, what we're getting ourselves into is the general question. So that's why we spent some money on that. And it kept going from there. Once we've identified there were some issues, we had to fix them. You know, it's a public building, and we want it to be a safe building. We want it to be structurally sound, so we spent the $200,000. So I think Councillor Duggal was mentioning the amount of money, the $114,000. It was roughly 1 year ago, because it was the same meeting as getting another $80,000 to the bike park to finish that project, that we authorized another $86,000 to bring it to a total of $200,000 to get the structural work done, which we've pretty much spent here then, right? And then more intervention into the original plan, which is simply moving into that building, looking at the option of finishing it all at once instead of a phased approach over years, which was the original plan. I'm thinking we all want to see it finished eventually. Maybe the best option is to go back to that original plan, spend a bit of money on it, I don't know exactly how much, but to get it operational so that we can get in there and do what we intended on doing a year and a half, 2 years ago. Buys us some time to have the discussion on what is the final project going to look like, what's its uses going to be, who's going to be in that building, and how we're going to pay for that. I think the council has committed to spending some money there, regardless of whether it's to finish it completely or not. But I think the goal that council voted on was to get in there as an operational building. In the meantime, if we're in there, that does free up the other property that we can put on the market, do whatever we're going to do with it, and that helps bring in some income to help pay for this project. And I kind of think that's where we need to go. I don't like rushing into this grant application with unknowns, without even having that discussion that we've been trying to have for quite some time as to what's this going to look like at the end of the day. Not just physically look like, but use, all of that. I think it's possible to spend some money there. I don't know what we can do to pretty it up, to make it, you know, welcome. Because I don't want it to be a construction zone either. But I want to see it used sooner than later, because that was the original intent. So maybe we can talk about that just a little bit.
Thank you. So, yeah, I got a lot of thoughts, but I believe that going forward with the grant application, with the numbers that are given, even though they're not solid concrete numbers, as you're saying, Councillor Erickson, from an architect, could they be more, could they be less? I mean, like that's an unknown, right? But I think that what I hear being said is that if they're a little more padded, you can't go back to the granting authority and ask for more money if the amount comes in higher. So as big a number as this is, it's startling, but yet when we're applying for funding for that project, having a bigger number is probably better, because if we are successful, then we're gonna get more of that paid for, as opposed to us having to come up with the money. I don't necessarily want to see a grant left on the table and not applied for, because if we can simultaneously work with an architect to get designs done up and we have the grant in, if we don't get the grant, no harm, no foul, we're still going to get the architect designs, and then maybe we can continue to do the phased approach after that. But at least we've applied for the grant, and then we get the architect working at the same time.
Councillor Smith and Councillor Erickson.
I'm in agreement to Council Duggal here. I think it's the same thing as almost like the Cock Lake project, Cock Lake Bridge project. We put there were some high numbers from previous council put up there to ensure that there's any unforeseeables, there's padding there, like she said. And I think that's what the quantity surveyor's done in this piece here as well for us, it's in front of us. Yes, it's some high numbers, yes, there's some unknowns, but if we don't go ahead and apply for the grant, we can never say we could have got it or could not have got it. So I do understand why we're into the process we're in. I agree with Councilor Medlock at the same time that the project changed scope so much on where we wanted to be, what was gonna happen, and then as time has changed in the last 12 months since I've been on council, the project's changed to a dramatic effect that we're here now. We all of a sudden wanna finish it now as Cadillac washrooms. So I think I'm for going forward with the grant application, and then if we're denied the grant application, while we're in works with the architect together, work with the steering committee of Advantage Hope, anybody that wants to be a stakeholder in this project. We've had letters of support from them, talked and have meetings with these while the decision is being made on the grant application, and make sure that we have all our ducks in a row, so if they say yes, we can go forward and move forward with it, and I think staff wants to do that too. And if not, maybe some ideas come to the table while we're having these discussions with these groups, with the building, and something else, if we do decide that we don't get the grant, we can go a different option on something, or a different scope. The project might change again then, but it gives us some, we have to have these talks to figure out exactly where this building's gonna go in the end, regardless of grant or not having a grant. And I think that needs to happen plain simple.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, Councillor Erickson, Councillor Crawford.
Okay, the question is, why did the project change? That's a very easy question to answer. Project changed because we got more information than we had last January. Last January, we had a group come here and say we're gonna spend, we had some homeowner's inspector come in and say it's gonna cost $98,000 to fix the building. $98,000. Then we had another 104, we added 114, no, it's gonna be 114,000. Then it was 200,000. It's because as we got into the building, we saw more and more trouble in the building as we got into it. More and more cost. The engineer charged, $160,000 just to make it structurally sound. And if we would have got the architect out to very beginning, if we would have just had the common sense to go and say to 2 or 3 contractors, is this building salvageable? And what would it cost? We didn't ask anybody with experience that. We didn't. And we didn't ask, I went and asked 3 different contractors. 3 different contractors in January or February of last year. And all of them said, every one of them said, tear the building down. It's not worth fixing. And I told that in council meeting. And these are what the contractors said. So council moved ahead saying we're gonna redo this. So I supported it, and I still support the project. I wanted to go ahead, but I don't support $1 million put into it. The community will not support, I don't think, $1 million. And I think if we had the community to do it, we should have a referendum. Because this is way too much money for an old building. We could spend that on a beautiful new building, and we'd have something as a showcase. We're gonna have an old building restored, and it's still gonna be old. The structure's still gonna be old. And it's still gonna be lots of crookedness in it, lots of defects that we have to work around. So that's how I see we've got to this point. And we've never taken time as council to sit down and say where we're going. We've been taking advice from other people that do not have the expertise in reconstructing a complicated old building. So my suggestion is we take time out, we take the time out as council and sit down what we want as council, and then go forward what we want. Then if we need to have some stakeholders come and give us some advice, yes. But at the present time, we must get the advice from expertise. And I think the good start was we got this guy, the surveyor guy, but that wasn't the right decision again. And I'm just looking to see who authorized this decision. And it says on the second page, who authorized this decision? And it wasn't council.
It was council.
It was council.
It was
council that said we could hire a surveyor?
Yes.
I think
At the
council-
last council meeting, it was
Yes.
very clear. We identified that getting an architect in time for the grant application was not even a remote possibility. Because I brought that up as well as an idea, and it was clearly identified that the timelines given would not allow us to get an architectural.
I understand
Plan in
that.
place.
I understand. It was-
So we have engineered drawings with architectural elements. That's what we have.
We have engineered drawings, yes, we do.
Yeah, with architectural elements in it.
One architectural element,
Yeah,
the bathroom, okay,
Yeah.
that's the only thing.
yeah. So So the long and the short of it is, this was the only avenue to pursue to even qualify for the grant, to,
be ashamed of
For the speed to get it done in this period of time. But I think if you were to look and see, I'm gonna go back and look at the meeting on video, because I know we talked about it and we questioned why when we said we were going to have an architect, now we come in with this quantity survey. We questioned that, and I don't remember having a motion that, maybe we did, but then I messed up. But I still think we wasted
yeah, I think if you
$7,000.
review the video, you'll clearly see that majority agreement that it's either get a quantity survey, get some numbers, or sit it out.
I remember talking about it, but I don't remember a motion.
Your worship, the April 11th motion was that council direct staff to engage an architect/consultant to provide additional design and project scope, including costs to inform the grant application.
That was April 11th meeting, yes?
Yeah. And at the last meeting that we
But
had,
just gonna comment on that, but if you look at the video, and I looked at that video very carefully, that consultant was put in afterward, and Scott put in an amendment after that to include the group from Advantage Hope, the steering committee to be involved. You put that. But all during that discussion, it was discussed with an architect. And then that other comment was put in at the end. I went and looked through that meeting, because I wasn't here at that time. All I know, if we would have gone and done what was right to start with, what everybody else does, we wouldn't have been in this problem we are right now. We would have had accurate information last January or February.
Councillor Crop and Councillor Miller.
Okay, so clearly there's been some issues that we don't all agree on, and some we do. So that's typical of any council. But here, the issue is the spending of all this cash, and I'm not in favor of spending $1 million, nor will I be. The other deal is that if we go into a phased approach like we had originally talked about, and it gives us an opportunity to think about what we're really going to spend on an architect, to give us some drawings. That's something that we don't have in this particular grant application budget, nor do we have it in our budget for this. So we need to find that money. That's pretty critical to what we're going to do in the future in that spot. So I think that if we did want to pursue a grant application, a small one, to do phase 1 or 2, whatever, 2 I guess now, whatever that looks like, it will have to be within our budgeted funds that we've budgeted already and that we've passed. I'd be in favor of that, but not this.
Okay, Councillor Miller.
Yes, just wanted to comment on Councillor Erickson's comments about the homeowner inspection. That was never something that we did. That was the province when they still own the land, right? That
No.
they hired.
Who pays them?
We instructed
There was a
to
report
get
that
that
was
money.
given to us by the highways company. Is that the report?
Your worship, that's correct. One report was provided by Highways. We subsequently hired or ensured we had Kirkhoff do a detailed stamp report.
But that one they were referring to the $90,000. That was not ours. That was
That report was brought to council.
yeah, that was provided to us by the province that they commissioned that report ahead of time. So I just want to make that clear. We didn't go and hire our own building inspector. And then asking contractors if it's worth fixing, you know, we did. We have had a steering committee of people that were very talented and have been in the business and they know what they're talking about as well. And they also believe that it's worth fixing. That's why they spend thousands, or not thousands, hundreds of hours of volunteer time in there trying to make it happen. You know, these questions were brought up and the answer to those questions were answered in that risk analysis that broke it down into the mechanical, the electrical, the traffic, the structural, and then we're now responding to those things. And that's what we seem to be doing, is we're being very reactive, and I kind of want to put a stop to that. I kind of want to see us, I definitely want to see us just go forward with our original motion, which was to get occupancy in the building. we never have had that conversation that we keep talking about this $1 million building. I don't know that we ever decided we wanted that. The original goal was to simply move in there. We have an old building that we're in now. The station house was being used in the state that it was, and we could still be in there. I think we're in a better place now that we have it all upgraded structurally. But I don't think we need to spend $1 million on it today.
I think we have to clarify a couple of things. Number one, staff has done I would say exactly what council directed them. So if there's any critical analysis, that any figures to be pointed, if someone wants to blame council, they can do so. I think we were very clear about the exploratory nature of this work. I think spending the money with Mr. Kale was money well invested, because we have more information now than we had before. If we choose not to apply for the grant, that is certainly our option. Obviously, applying for a grant with no information is obviously not even a possibility. I think gathering information to be ready for grant application is just due diligence for council and for staff. And I thank staff for the work that they put into this. This project will never please everyone in town. That is a guarantee. There are people that have a perpetual hate on for that location. There are people that want it only an arts center, not a tourist info center. There are people that passionately dislike Advantage Hope, and they could pay for the project out of pocket themselves, and it would still be the wrong deal. That's just the reality of Hope. We have a divided community on this issue. So as council, we have to come up with a common sense middle ground solution to make this project work. And obviously that's why we're here today. We have quite a few members of the public who probably want to speak to this. Although it's not customary in a special council meeting, I think we'll probably afford the members of the public an opportunity to speak to this here and give us input. Councillor Dykes?
Right, just for clarification, the district is not spending $1 million on this project. We're spending $300,000. So the reality, for the grant is $500,000.
The total price is 1 point.
Well, if we go with all these other options, but I mean, I don't think, those are options. So if you're buying a car, you don't need to go with the options. So we're not spending $1 million.
Okay, Councillor Erickson and Councillor Smith.
Just looking at it, if we were successful in the grant application, 300,000 portion of ours, 200 that we've already allocated, $100,000 on top of it for the architect. We're gonna spend $600,000 on that building. If we go this full approach from start to finish, the way that.
For the backhoe.
It's hard to hear.
Yeah, you know, just as a courtesy to the rest of us, maybe we can speak one at a time. That would be great.
So going over these numbers here, that's a big number for that building, plus the 500,000 that the government would kick in on the excluding the happy things that we'd like to have in there, like the ventilation system and stuff like that. And I do understand that these numbers are padded for the grant application process. So that's $1.1 million. But listening more and more, and I agree with Council Medlock. We've got Advantage Hope came to us with it, to council with this project, and was an idea, and previous council went forward with it. And I think staff has done a great job, and I think we as council should apologize to staff on the yo-yo that we've been putting along here with staff, making them do this and making them do that. I think that's on us. But I think we need to figure out exactly what we want to do, and we need to be all on board on this, because like Mayor Wilford says, nobody's going to be happy with, not everybody's going to be happy with this, but I think that we need to be happy with it, otherwise we're going to be kicking ourselves in the butt. I truly do. So, and listening more and with numbers, thinking about numbers and thinking more about this project, I think going back to that phased approach and getting occupancy is the way that we should be doing this, the way this project first came to us intended. I think that's the proper approach. I think it's, yes, we've spent some money, yes, it's not bad money spent, but I think that's the process we need to have. Like I heard in couple council meetings now about the washrooms, they need to be this big, this big awesome washrooms. Well, I've gone to a lot of places where they're not that good of washrooms, we can make do with what we got too. So, that's my opinion.
Okay. Councillor Erickson, Councillor Miller.
Okay, the comment on the phased approach. So if we think we're spending $1 million on, if we do it from start to finish, the phased approach will cost a lot more over time. Yes, we'll be putting $100,000 this year and $100,000 next year and $100,000. It's gonna cost a lot more to get to the building to the state we're in. So if we wanna spend more money, keep going the phased approach. Now, I wanna talk a little bit about this rural dividend program. I read through this application. Who wrote the application?
Your worship, myself and Mr. Dickin did.
You're the only people that did it?
We did pass it to Advantage Hope for a quick review as the major partner in this project, because we need to partner with someone in order to qualify for $500,000, so it's only fair they assist where they can.
So there's a couple questions I have relating to that. It says under 2, I just want this report to be, upfront and true, and I'm just wondering if it is. Under 2 where it says eligibility screening, District of Hope, Fraser Valley Regional District A, B, and D. Have they supported this? Did you talk to them and ask them if they supported this project to be put in this legal document?
Item 2.2 speaks to identify the eligible communities/communities that will be supported by the project. Respectfully not supporting the project. Fraser Valley Regional District A, District B, and District D are supported by the Visitor Center. We provide information for their venues, their tourism venues, and if there are any inquiries about business opportunities or people wanting to move there, of course the Visitor Center and Advantage Hope pass that information on and action the information. That's what this block refers to.
Yeah, it does not indicate endorsement.
I'm just asking the
Yeah.
question. I'm asking the question.
Good to clarify.
And then the other one has to do with the natives. Have we talked to them? Are they gonna be using the station now, the Tourist Information Center? Have we talked to them, or is there a desire for them? A couple places in here they talk about.
Are you talking First Nations?
Yes, First Nation.
Yes, I have consulted with First Nations, in particular the Union Bourbon, and perhaps we get a letter of support if council decides to move forward with the application. Again, as a visitor center and an economic development center, we would support them because if they have any tourist information, we obviously publicize and steer tourists there. And again, if someone said, I'm looking to start up something that we know there's an opportunity within the region, be it Hope, the regional area, or an adjacent First Nation, why wouldn't we assist in that? Because that could mean jobs for the entire region.
And the last question is regarding Hope Search and Rescue. There's 2 comments on that regarding Hope Search and Rescue and their property. Under 3, the last paragraph, it will free up resources and options to improve or better locate Hope Search and Rescue and other prime commercial land where the current inadequate visitor center, museum, and Hope Search and Rescue are located. The current inadequate visitor center, I thought we just got a report the other day that the visitor center held over 200 and plus more people over the long weekend than they ever had. There was some report that I saw.
It was on Facebook.
It was on Facebook?
Yeah, which is reliable.
And yeah, Facebook definitely has to be taken by Dawson.
But anyway, it says inadequate visitor center.
Still.
Inadequate, I don't think that would be the right, the visitor center has been adequate for all these years. If we put $100,000 into the visitor center, it could operate for many years if we clean that up, put a little money. And then the other one is under 3.5, where it talks about the Hope Search and Rescue again will improve local search and rescue operation as property will be freed up for expansion or sale and relocation of the current Hope Search and Rescue facility. We haven't even talked about that.
Actually,
as a council.
If I can, I'll try to answer the first question first. The current visitor center, despite the numbers being reported, and they are increased, is really not a great site. It's not a great building, and in fact, we believe it is it is inadequate. And in fact, we have to make the point, if we want to put in a saleable grant application. If we were to stay, the current visitor center is totally adequate and satisfactory. The granting body is kind of, well, we don't really need this money. The second point is reference search and rescue. Clearly, council has discussed this, and it does allow for options to be developed for search and rescue. Either to remain on site, potentially augment their building, or build a new one that's bigger to suit, or council will have the option to sell that property, assist search and rescue, potentially to relocate and rebuild, and council would have, and the district would garner the money from the sale and a higher use of that property. I'm stating the obvious in the grant application. There's no subterfuge, there's nothing like that involved.
Yeah, and I think council has clearly identified that we have no interest in leaving search and rescue homeless, because they're an amazing group in our community and they're a huge blessing to the region. But I think the reality is that the best commercial location in the community, tied up by a enterprise that doesn't rely on drive-by business, like you don't drive by there and decide that you're going to get lost in the bush and you know, need the services of search and rescue. There's other locations in Hope which Mr. Fordolowski has been investigating, and which will be sitting down with the search and rescue group in an in-camera session, because it's property acquisition related. We had this discussion at the last council get-together. That was very clear. The message was not minced at all. So I think we're on the right track. Of course, the advantage to having a large-scale commercial development on that property is that we would garner yearly tax revenue from that. If a hotel, for instance, moved there, it'd be 20, 30 grand in the taxpayer's pocket every year that obviously we're getting zero from right now. So we could locate the search and rescue to a mutually agreed upon location that is equally convenient or potentially more convenient, and then free up the entire property for resale. So, I mean, I don't think we'll have a lot of trouble selling that whole property once we, you know, decide if that's council's decision. Councilor Stewart?
I just want to clarify that that decision has not yet been made nor fully discussed, so I'm open to that conversation taking place in the near future.
Yeah, no, but I mean,
Just to
there's,
clarify, I don't share the same
That's right.
thoughts or feelings regarding that. I need to make that clear. Very good.
okay, sounds good. Councilor Brown?
Thank you, and I'd just like to clarify that too. The discussion that you said that we really had very loosely because a member of the public brought that forward, and we were kind of discussing that, and you gave your views. And we, as a council, did not discuss that or debate that, so it's pretty important because people that are here in the community and here today are now wondering if that's what happened, and really that's the conversation we had. Right?
Yeah, we had a conversation with Search and Rescue last year. We made a commitment that they would not be homeless. We also indicated that we were looking at all options. So, I mean, we've been very clear.
And we
But no final
promised a
decision's been
meeting,
made.
we promised a future meeting,
Yeah,
that's for the conversation.
and that will be done in a timely fashion. Councilor Miller?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring back to my point about how much we potentially could be spending on this project if we went through with this now. Councillor Smith brought up, I think, the 1.1 million, we'll just use as a round number. The maximum we can apply for the grant is 500,000, which leaves 600,000 to be our share. Plus there's 100,000 on top of that that we need for an architect. So that's 700,000, plus the 200 we've spent, so it's 900,000. So in round numbers, almost at $1 million. And, you know, I'm not to say that we're not going to spend that eventually over time. I just don't know that this is the time. We have a lot of other needs in the district that we could be spending our money on, and I kind of want to focus on that too.
Well, my personal opinion is if we don't have a majority interested in this pursuing the grant application, we should probably have a motion on the table that indicates that. Otherwise, we'll be chasing our tail for the rest of the evening. That would be my friendly suggestion. Because I don't sense there's a majority interested, you know, in applying for the grant. Yeah.
Like I said, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm really torn. I understand that if we apply for the grant, doesn't mean it's a commitment to follow through on it, so
Yes, it is.
Definitely. Is it? Well, and we already asked that question to set this meeting, that if we apply for it, we have to go through?
Yes.
Okay, then I guess I'm not in favor of applying for the grant right now. But I am in favor of spending some money on the station house to get it operational right now.
So I guess there would be probably a need for a motion to not apply for the grant, if that's the majority opinion of council.
Can I have make a comment?
Well, you can have a motion to
Oh, it
not
has to be in a
apply.
positive intent,
Well, based on the comments around the
based on what
council,
council. It has to be a positive action.
you can essentially say, we will not be applying for the grant. Correct? We can direct staff to not apply for the grant.
Absolutely. That's
That
what
is
the
totally in good
resolution is.
taste, if that's the majority vision of council.
We are not passionate about it, we are staff, we do what you say.
Yeah, so they're at our discretion, one can tell what direction to. Councillor Croft and Councillor Miller.
Thank you. So my question is, because we do have money budgeted in our budget to put towards this project, and we will need some money to get that up and operating, I'm wondering if it's a possibility for us to apply for a downscaled phase 2 of the grant.
The second intake.
It would probably have to be the second intake, though, you're right there, that's.
Okay, so then I'm gonna make a motion that we revisit a grant application in the fall on the second intake. And at that time, and by that time, I'd like to see an architect drawing and some public input into that. And I'd like that included in my motion.
I'll second
Okay, moved and seconded.
Can we have comments from the public
Yep.
before we decide?
Michelle, we could have a motion on the table,
Yeah.
otherwise we're chasing each other around in circles all night.
I'd like to make a few
Mr.
comments.
Gardner, yes.
I feel for this council, because I think the report you got tonight should have been here a year ago, before you made a decision to do what you're gonna do up there. And I feel sorry for that, and I think fault has gotta be with somebody that didn't happen. You should have had this report that you got tonight, that it's gonna cost $1 million to renovate that before you even spent the $200,000. I think this council has really lost faith in our community, by spending $200,000. And now we're talking about applying for a $1 million grant or $500 grant and putting another $500,000 in. The information they received, you didn't get, and you made a decision on, in my opinion, no information. And I feel for you, because I think you got led down the garden path there. Secondly, I'm really concerned as a long-time former mayor about this, facing this project. Because once you open that up, you're inviting the whole world to come to Hope and walk into this building. And here we got reports for the last year and a half, that this building is no good. It's rotten, it's falling down. So are you gonna so you do a little bit of work up there. So you're gonna put your building inspector on the spot to sign it that it is safe to walk in there, okay? Or you want to do that, or you're gonna get an outside inspector, which you should get if you're gonna do this thing. And I don't think you'll find any building inspector or any inspector that's gonna say this building is safe without spending this $1 million that you're gonna put into it. Because if I take my grandchild in there and he falls through something that should have been fixed, I'm suing you. And I got all this evidence, public information, that this building is unsafe, the 2x4s are rotten. I've been up and looked at this building, you know. So I think they're really putting the town in a lot of liability, and I'm part of this town. I got my tax notices today. I still haven't got over that, but anyway.
You're still standing.
Yeah. So I think you have to be very careful what you do here. And if you're gonna spend, in my experience, close to $1 million, you spend 200, you're gonna spend another 500, you're gonna spend 100 on an architect, it's gonna be close to $1 million to finish this building. You better go to the people and ask them. If they wanna put $1 million into this building. And if I was the guy in Ottawa that's gonna do these grants, would I give you a grant of $500,000 to a $1 million application, when I could probably build this building new for not much over $500,000? So I mean, why are we doing this? Why are we making this town look so, I don't know how you want to say it. Stupid is probably the word you should say. By applying for $1 million building that you could build for $500,000, applying for $500,000 in a building that you're saying is $1 million. Hey, we're way up to lunch here, guys.
I think
In my opinion. I'm sorry, I just have to say what I'm saying. And I'm a pretty substantial taxpayer in this community. And I talk to a lot of taxpayers. They come and see me to this day, 3 or 4 a day, and talk about things like this. And I think the information you got, and I think staff has to accept that responsibility. Should have been here a year ago. When you got, if you were told a year ago today, before you spend any money there, that it's gonna cost $1 million to do that building, I'm sure none of you would have voted for it. I know all of you pretty well. And I'm sure none of you would have voted for that. But now we're saying, we're into it. Hey guys, you spent $200,000. Forget about it. Tear it down, do something. We learned a good lesson from it, but let's not keep pouring money into this building. Holy man.
Mr. Gardner, I guess to appropriately address a couple of your points there. Number one, you're saying we look stupid. That's only for people that listen to misinformation. We've been very diligent about researching the facts. There's been a lot of stupid comments in town about this project. I absolutely agree with that. Council, for instance, tonight, this is doing due diligence to see, can we afford the Cadillac model? Is there any interest in that? We might have to stick to the Chevy Sprint version that we were originally planning on, to put it in car terms. And that is, we're doing our due diligence.
Not after spending $200,000.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I guess two quick things on the 200,000, 160 something. Mr. Dickin, when he spoke to Mr. Kale, the quantity surveyor and the experienced contractor, he asked as well, what kind of mileage do you think we got out of the money that was spent with the Advantage Hope contract? And his comment was he was surprised that it only cost what it did, given the scope of the work that was done. It is a safe building now. It definitely can be enhanced. I think you're painting a picture that some old haunted house where enter at your own peril. I mean, that is not the case here. It's not as good as we wanted, but it's certainly not a derelict building anymore. We did the structural upgrades necessary to get it to a safe level. So, I mean, I think it's important to stick to the facts here, and I think that's the kind of thing that is very important in the process, because fear-mongering based on misinformation is not a particularly productive exercise in my opinion. Mr. Wiens, I believe you're next.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I'm here for myself, I'm on the board of Advantage Hope. I'm not speaking for Advantage Hope, I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I find it just unfathomable that Donna and Bob don't know how this thing got to where it is. I just can't believe that you're sitting there asking that question.
I know how it got here, in case you
Let
wonder.
me finish. Let me finish. Advantage Hope jumped through every single hoop that you guys put in front of them. Every one of them. The last renovation that took place went a little bit over budget, not a ton, went a little bit over budget, but it's signed off, Bud. It's signed off. It's a safe building. That was what they wanted to do. That's what you wanted them to do. It's done. I find it it's really frustrating. Everything was going really, really good, and then Bob, all of a sudden you showed up and said, this isn't good enough. We need to make this thing fantastic. And now we're at $1 million. That's where it came from. That's where it started. It's just unbelievable.
Okay, Councilor Erickson. Thank you, Mr. Robbins.
Number one, if you talk to any contractor that does these kind of
We
renovations.
are contractors.
You don't.
One at a time.
Don,
Mr.
I'm talking right now, please.
Go ahead.
I want the floor. Okay, you talk to contractors that do this kind of renovation. Okay, nobody on that job that has done that kind of renovation. Raz Chabot has never done that kind of renovation. He's an engineer.
Right.
He's an engineer.
Right.
He told me himself he's never done it. He's a
Right.
volunteer,
Right.
and he went to your meeting. I talked to Jim Dent myself,
Yeah.
and, well,
Well,
Jim-
what?
Jim Dent himself told me that he doesn't like what's going on up there. He said it could have been done altogether differently. He
Absolutely.
told-
it could
That's
be.
right. So
Absolutely.
when I went and did all that research, those 2 weeks of research, and I saw the massive amount of work that has to go into that building, and how much that front wall is all rotten yet.
Oh, come on,
And it,
come on.
has anybody seen it? I've
It's
seen
got
it.
rotted in, there's no question about that.
There's what?
It's a 100-year-old building, there's no question.
That's
it's
right,
got
and
rot.
so you have to redo
It
that.
is
front-
safe. The engineer signed off on it.
Don, I'm talking, please.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, one at a time, please.
That's right. So when you see all the massive amount of work, and in my experience and the jobs that I have been involved
And
in,
you're a contractor?
I'm not a contractor,
Mr.
but-
Weeds, one at a time, please. Just-
but I've done a lot of work. My brother's a contractor, and I will partner with him, in case you're wondering. And we've done many projects just like this one, many. And I know what it takes, and I know the time it takes, time involved to work through these projects in preparation to start the project. And I know how much time it takes to get bidders in, and I know how you have to start, where you start. You start with an architect, and the architect asks you 3 questions. What is your objective? How much time do you have? And what's your dollar? Those are the 3 things. We haven't done that here. We haven't sat down as council and said, what kind of building do we want up there? We've never talked. Do we want forced air heat? We never talked about, do we have to take the siding off? We've never talked about, we've let other people make that decision. It's not their building, it's our building. And we have to make those kind of decisions. We can't, that's why we're in the trouble we are, because we've taken advice
We're
from
not in
people.
trouble, Bob.
We are in big trouble. We
We
got
are
$1
not-
million
we are-
building. I'm
Because
talking.
somebody came along and said, we
Excuse me?
need to make this better.
Mr. Weeds, just,
Excuse me,
that-
I'm
Oh,
trying to,
listen.
I'm talking here. We are in trouble. Now we got $1 million that we gotta come up. We don't have to come up with $1 million.
You're right.
If we came and we had an architect, RFP architects and got 2 or 3 of them to bid on this job, we could get a lot less than 100,000, I can guarantee it, this architect. We have to do the RFP process. We haven't been doing that. So the whole procedure from the start has not been according to the way the District of Hope sets up their procedure. We let Advantage Hope take it, and yes, they did a good job. They did what they could, but it's beyond them to finish this building right now, I can tell you that. We need
Can I
a
speak
contractor,
now?
just a minute. We need a contractor to do the building. We need a contractor to do the building from start to finish. I don't care if it's one guy like Jim Dent to take it over and say, and hire certain specific people, that's fine with me, but we need one person that is knowledgeable and expert in this, that has done many of these buildings, not just one or remodeled a house. This is way bigger than that. Okay, I'm done.
You never asked me about my credentials. Never looked into it.
What's that?
He's a joke.
Don't look at me, I didn't say nothing.
It's, what do we have left up there, Bob? We have electrical to do, we have plumbing to do, drywall, paint, floors. We don't need to spend $100,000 on an architect so that they can design your bathrooms. This is just a nightmare now. We could, like, you summed it up excellently. You summed it up perfectly. We could have moved in there replacing 4 exit signs. And now we're at $1 million. Thank you, Bob.
well, I think this was exploratory, so this is, we're not spending $1 million. We're looking at different options, so that's, I think it's important to clarify. Mr. Dupre.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments to make, just observations. It seems like Mr. Erickson, or Councillor Erickson, is just looking backwards all the time instead of potentially looking forward. You've criticized the council saying, why didn't we look at, do we need forced air? Why didn't you bring that up at a council meeting and say, look guys, we need to get on the ball here. Do we need forced air? Do we need all this stuff? You just amaze me that you're so negative about the rest of the people on the council. The other comment that I'll make is when it comes to saying, maybe we'll get a grant for $500,000. Maybe Kinder Morgan will give us $500,000. It's like me deciding to build a house and saying, well, maybe Uncle Fred will give me $200,000, and maybe I'll win the lottery and get $300,000, and then I'll build my house. How can you possibly commit to work without knowing if you've got any money? It's just, you're putting things way in the wrong order. You gotta have the money in your pocket before you take your wallet out and say, here, go to it. And Councillor Erickson, you sit there with that smug look on your face, and it's
There's no
just
need for personal attacks, Mr. Dupre.
with that look on your face, and it's just amazing to me that that the rest of the council is still sitting here.
I think a couple quick things, Mr. Dupre. Number one, I think Councillor Erickson has actually been very consistent in his approach on this. Some may not appreciate his approach or style, but he's been very consistent from the get-go. So the forced area issue, all this, it's not a big surprise. It's been there from day one. So essentially was outvoted on council, so we moved a different path. So that's that. Speaking to your point about the whole planning to build, if we don't know if the grant is coming, that is the whole point of applying for a grant. We have different options. We were looking at, obviously it doesn't look like it's going to happen, but we were investigating applying for a grant. And obviously if a grant was not forthcoming, had we applied, then we would obviously look at other options at that point. So that's the whole point of applying for a grant. It gives you additional mileage which your limited resources can't provide. So,
And I just have one more comment about that. If you're not going to apply for a grant, I know that there are other community groups that have asked the council to support grant applications. And I believe the comment that the mayor made at one of the meetings was, we're not going to support anybody else in town because it just muddies the water as far as our grant application goes. So now if you decide, well, we're not going to apply for the grant, those other community groups are saying, we got less than a day.
well, the rationale for that comment was based on the fact we were planning on applying for a grant. The grant money comes out of the exact same pocket. So it would be rather two-faced of us to say, hey, we're totally behind the golf course, but we're applying as well for the same money. That's not an honest and upfront approach. It is honest to say we're going to vigorously apply for a grant. Now, obviously, this is hypothetical at this point because it doesn't look like we're going to apply for a grant. But it's obviously not appropriate to support your grant when we're trying to more vigorously argue for ours. So that was the rationale behind that, and it was the agreement of the council as well to take that approach. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes, that's nice, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to say that I'm really proud of what has happened with the station house thus far. I think the building has been, we've been in and out of it over the many years that it's been up there. And had I ever thought that the roof was going to fall down on me when I went to a fundraiser or any of the groups or organizations that have been working there and trying their best to keep things going there, I've been horrified to think that the district would have allowed me to go in there because the district owned the building. So it's better than it was, for sure. And I'm really proud to know that so much in the way of what has happened has been done by volunteers, and I think that's an energy that the town needs to foster and continue to help grow, because a town our size relies on volunteers to do so much, and if they're not treated with respect, then they won't participate. I'm also concerned to hear Advantage Hope being spoken of as some entity that is some kind of group that parachuted in and has taken over. It's a design of council. I went to the annual general meeting, and the members on the board of directors are appointed by members of council and staff of the District of Hope. They may be at arm's length, but they're not some foreign body that is working against anybody. They work in conjunction with the people around this table, and work in part on this project with their direction. What I think I see here is vast disagreement between the members at this table, and I will say that I don't think looking back at how the decisions were made is helpful. I think you have to start from here and look forward and see what we can do. Personally, I wouldn't be supportive of applying for a grant like this. I think if you go back and continue in the spirit that the project has developed to this point, using volunteer labor, you'll have a building that the community will be proud of. If some of the comments that were made from the gallery, it's bulldozed, I'll be furious. We have lived with that building in this community for a long time, and it is now at the point where we've put a significant amount of energy into it to bring it to a stage where we can all be proud to walk into it. There's a pool of water that gathers in the current museum, and that's not a great situation for museum artifacts. So something has to happen as far as the museum is concerned, and I don't know how much that would cost because I am not a contractor.
Mm-hmm. I don't believe our new museum will have a water feature.
No, I don't think so, yeah.
Yeah, no, and speaking to your point about the value of the building to the community, a lot of groups over the years have worked very hard to preserve it, and I think tearing it down, starting over would have been a bit of a disrespect to those groups over the years, because it does have value as a building that held the passions of many groups over the years. So there's definitely, I think council's very aware of that feeling in the community. A lot of people put a lot of sweat equity into moving it and maintaining it as best they could, and keeping it from going into a complete state of disrepair. So I think as far as victories over the last year, we've had quite a few. We have a building now which is structurally sound from an engineering point of view. That's been dealt with. It's not a beauty queen yet, but it's en route. And as far as another victory, and I give Mr. Fredolowski credit for this, we actually ended up with the land from highways essentially at no cost, which was we had a very innovative solution there, which he orchestrated, which I think was very impressive leadership there from an administration point of view. So we've done a lot of good things, and exploring all options is not a bad thing at all. So additional comments? Reasonably respectful from the others? Yes, sir.
Your Worship, I don't envy the position that council's in right at the moment. My apologies to Mr. Fredolowski. He had communicated to Hope Search and Rescue with a request for letter of support for the grant application, and with the short timelines that we had to present any kind of response, our board meeting's not until tomorrow, so I have reached out to some of my board partners, and right now at this point in time, Hope Search and Rescue is not prepared to support the grant application based on just the lack of knowledge on what's going on, as well as that information. It's a major decision regarding land and building for us, so we have to take that to our members. Not just the board. So in order to provide that stamp of approval, that needs to go to our entire membership. So with the timelines presented, we're not prepared to support. One other thing, it was noted that that was tabled in the grant application prior to receiving our support. So I understand you're probably not going forward, but if that changes, right now, we'd like that removed if it is in the grant.
We never indicated search and rescue support in there.
Well, there,
It indicates different options for search and rescue.
understand. Well,
That is what it
regardless,
is.
we'd like that removed, because for one, right now, we're not in support of moving off that property. Understand that's district property. We've been there for 53 years. A year ago, we put in a proposal to council. We brought in, we provided a presentation. We've met with district staff. We've done walkabouts. We've outlined what we want, what we requested, and we never did get a response back. I understand now we're being asked to wait until the station house, till things happen with the station house. We asked for that proposal a year ago to be proactive for your needs, so that you could determine what was happening with that property. We were asking for that potentially to be subdivided, so that you could sell off a portion with the Visitors Info Center on it and utilize those funds for whatever your needs were. We're still waiting on that proposal to be dealt with, so we continue to hear that. We'll look at search and rescue, and we'll look at other options. Right now, we have a proposal forward for the one option, and that's kind of our focus, so that's where we stand right at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thank
And
you very
I
much.
think the interesting perspective of council, of course, is we have to look at all options for the public, so we want to make sure that, and this is an approach I'll be taking into the discussions, I'm speaking as an individual now, we have to look at all options available to nurture search and rescue. We have to look at ultimately what is best for the taxpayer. If we can find another suitable location, I would argue that freeing up the most prime piece of commercial real estate in the community and selling it and having a employment generating commercial development there might be a good move. It's worth discussion. As long as search and rescue has a good home, there seems to be this emotional attachment to the location, and I can see that. There's a lot of history there. But obviously you've clearly identified that your building is inadequate, that it has to be expanded, that you have equipment sitting outside now that isn't properly secured and properly taken care of due to the inclement weather here we get on occasion. So I think council's open-minded, but I would respectfully suggest that search and rescue remain open-minded too. Because we can't just say, well, this is our location, we're keeping it, and there's no other options. That's not, I don't think that's a community-minded approach. We have to look at all options.
You're sure I can respond to that. We are open-minded, and we are open-minded to further change. What we're asking is that our proposal that was put forward last year be addressed and not delayed. We've been waiting now a year of grant applications that we could be putting forward to build our building, if that is so decided amongst council. But we can't do anything right now while we're in limbo. So we are trying to be proactive. We're trying to work with council. We're trying to move that forward. We're not shutting the door at something. We're saying right now we're not looking to move. We're looking at our proposal that was put forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Well, we have a motion of council on the table, and maybe we could have a reread of the motion, because we've had a lot of discussion.
But it is expected that we revisit the BC Rural Dividend Program grant application for the fall intake of 2016 and ensure it includes architectural drawings.
So I guess speaking to that motion, there seems to be a lot of discussion around the council table about if we do a phased approach with a volunteer basis, do we need architectural plans?
Yeah, I'd like to,
Why are we going backward? I'm sorry to interrupt, but why are we
Well,
going
actually,
backward?
Councillor Medlock has the floor, Mr. Young.
Okay, yeah.
You'll be given an opportunity.
Okay,
see here in 2 years. Yeah. I don't know if I want to remove the architectural part of that or ask if that can be, but I do just want to make sure that regardless of what happens in that motion, that conversation that we need to have happens about the final outcomes, and have that conversation with council staff and Advantage Hope again, because they would be the people that'll be in that building and know the information about what the needs are. So I'd like to see if we could include that somehow in the motion. And maybe from that, there would be no architectural needs, I don't know, but maybe we can leave architectural drawings in there, as long as we have that conversation, I think that should be part of the motion.
Okay, so,
Okay. Mr. Perlowski, you wanted to...
Respectfully, Your Worship, I was going to suggest that you move to direct staff to report by the end of June with an option development, including planning, which may include phased, and the consultation plan, including potentially architectural drawings, so that council can get what is our best information, our best interpretation on the way you want to move ahead, and then you can confirm it. Maybe muddying the waters on a little bit on the decision tonight, because it's been quite controversial.
Really?
Might be worthwhile.
I think inherent in the whole thing is we have to have, before an architect is hired, if we indeed hire an architect, we have to have a discussion of council and the user groups as to what the final product roughly will look like. We may decide that, because it's an existing structure that's architecturally sound, supposedly, from an engineering perspective, we may decide that we really don't need an architect because we're all on a similar page as to what has to be done. It's only a matter of moving the front door over and adding a couple washroom stalls, and do we have to spend $100 grand to make that happen? Or is the money best spent actually getting the work done, as opposed to deciding how pretty the picture is before we start moving forward? So as long as there's an initial meeting of council and the user groups to let our hair down and really decide, okay, what's the final product to look like? Because otherwise we could spend a lot of money here without a real solid direction. Councillor Erickson, I think Councillor Crop was first, actually.
Okay, thank you.
Ladies first today.
So just for clarification, the reason that I would like to have this motion put through with an architectural drawing is because I would like us to be ready, grant ready, when the time comes. I'd like to have some public feedback in that time, not just Advantage, but obviously everyone that's decided to spend weeks and months coming out to these meetings because they are interested in what happens in that corner. Whether or not they like it or they don't, if everybody's included and gets a say in how we, potentially move forward with the grant application money, if we should be successful, makes it a community project, makes it everybody's project. This project was everybody's project for the last 20 years. Everybody wanted something at the station house. It's well documented. It's not something that's new. And we all wanted something there, and majority of people in all those things, all those ballots that I helped count, wanted was a visitor information center / museum up there. And it is needed up there. And it's what we can afford living within our means, in my opinion, that's going to make it or break it. So we do need to have something that Councillor Erickson, thank goodness for his good common sense in many things that he said. It may not have pushed the ball forward in some cases because we had to slow down a bit and have a look at what we were doing. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's sensible. So as far as the motion goes, I want to say that I'd like to see something grant ready when it comes time in the fall. I'd like to, in this time frame between June and late August, I'd like to see us have some meetings with everyone and talk about what, first of all, not with anybody else, with what council wants, so that we can be on the same page going forward instead of divided. And I'd like to see us bring that vision forward to the community and Advantage Hope to tweak it, because Advantage Hope will currently, God willing, be the occupant, but they might not have the contract in a year or 2 years. We don't know. So it'll be somebody else's. The point is, it's council's vision and with the community on board to make sure that it's something nice that everyone can be proud of. So I'd like to see that in a visual and I'd like to see us spend the money properly, but I'd like to have a good chance at getting that grant money. And we do have that money budgeted, and I don't want to go outside of that. I'd like to have that motion passed for those reasons. And because so far that's something that's been consistently coming up in our meetings that we seem to be remiss on. And I think it's time that we actually did that. Parking and all those things that come in play when we have that visual. We need to see what that's really gonna look like. It's no different like when we did the pool in the library. That was a big brouhaha, I'm sure somebody remembers. And the thing about that was, we had to have a visual. We had to have, you know, the town wasn't all happy about that one either, were they, bud? But the deal was once it got done, we tried to have all the fundraising and all that to offset a lot of those costs. And there was a visual, people got to look at it, and everybody's opinion counted, even though Bud didn't always agree with everybody. But everybody's
But
opinion
we got
was.
the pool and
That's right,
and
so
the
this is the same deal, people.
the only controversy we had was why are we building a pool
With the library.
and a library? And the only reason we did that is because they said only 7% of the people are gonna use the pool.
That's right.
So if we put a library with it, we're gonna get up to 16% use the facility, and we'll give you the grant, because now you got 16%. Only reason we did. Otherwise, if we'd have just applied for the pool, we would have not got the grant.
That's
Wouldn't
right.
be the grant.
So,
So we applied for a library and a pool, and we got the grant.
that's right,
And both
so.
governments.
And I wanted to add the college too, but that's a moot point, that's 20 years ago, so, anyways.
But,
So looking forward, and I might be a little ADD tonight here, but I just want to make sure that we have the exact wording of the motion. Is that amenable to council as a motion? Let's reread the motion, please, Ms. Bellingham.
Moved and seconded that we revisit the BC Rural Dividend Program grant application for the fall intake of 2016, and further that we ensure it includes architectural drawings.
Yeah. Now, would it be a friendly amendment there that we have option development list by the end of, as Mr. Forlowski was suggesting, that we have at a meeting, at a public meeting, we have a list of potential exact courses of attack here, so to speak. So is council amenable to that, so that at the end of June, that at a public council meeting, we have different timelines identified, maybe 2 or 3 different scenarios how we can attack this. Because there's no timelines attached to that motion. You know, there's no suggestion that we're going to have a meeting of council first and then the user groups and yada, yada, yada. So I think we have to avoid a monumental cluster, which this project seems to encourage. I think it's important that we have time for staff to develop maybe 2 or 3 different options for council to sink their teeth into, so that the staff isn't left hanging in the breeze here because there was ambiguity. This motion really is a good start, but it doesn't really give specific direction as to timelines.
yeah, we can have another motion for that. We can pass
Or just
this
at the
one
end of
and
it, just say that we, by the end of June, staff will come back to us with that option development concept. So maybe we'll have 3 different options available to council to satisfy a grant application in the fall, and then a couple different ways, 3 different ways of looking at it.
Okay, I'm amenable to that.
You know?
So I just, yeah, thank you, through you. I just need clarification though, because I mean, in my mind, I think if we're going the architectural design, we need that first before we can make any decisions about next steps forward. So until that happens, I'm not sure I'm comfortable making any decisions about what different options are available. So I guess I'm feeling like the architect design needs to come first before you come back to us
Yeah, I
saying,
think
here's
so. That's
options
true.
A, B, and C. Plus, I had another thought, but I lost it, so carry on.
Well, I guess my point of view would be, if we're going for a sort of a value village budget project, we don't necessarily have to spend $100,000 on an architect. You can buy a lot of toilets for $100,000.
But the motion says for an architect design, so we need the architect design to know what options are available, if we're gonna go full in, or if we're gonna go phased or not.
True, but I mean, I think that the issue is, we tell the architect exactly what we want, and he or she develops the plan.
That has to be done before.
We don't tell, the architect doesn't tell us what we need. So we may, after a meeting, as a council and as all the user groups, we may decide that all we have to do is add couple stalls in every washroom, we have to move the front door open, a few feet, make sure that the windows are slightly changed in their location. We don't have to spend $100,000 to figure that out, so I'm not in favor of spending $100,000
Okay,
just
I
for
see
some
what
minor
you're saying.
changes, so that,
It won't be 100. It won't be.
well, even, I'm not in favor of spending $20,000 if it's not
Okay.
needed.
There's 7 of us, so.
Well, I'm one vote, and I'm pretty clear about my vote, I don't wanna waste money. Okay, Mr. Dignan.
Your worship, I just wanted to add that at this point in time, so researching it, I'm not sure whether we could actually get architectural drawings prior to the next submission of the grant. Maybe possible, may not, but at this point in time, I'm not sure on that. And I did want to point out that we currently have in the budget for Station House $305,000. So we do have the money to hire an architect for the project.
And we can buy a few toilets for that too.
Can I make a comment,
Yeah.
Your Worship? I really think the motion tonight is to say we're not gonna apply for the grant this round. Then I think the council should sit down and decide what we're gonna do. If you apply for the grant and you get it, it's gonna cost $500,000 for the Hope taxpayers, for this architectural design. So, and if you got $300,000, why don't you go out and say to some contractors for a design and bid price to finish the inside, and this is what we want. We want 10 urinals, we want 6 lady stalls, and we want a decent place, and give us a price. They'll design it for you, they'll give you a price, you don't pay nothing. And there's probably 3 or 4 contractors out there that'll do that for you. And if you got $300,000 and you can get it done for $300,000, and make it a nice building, then why are you worried about spending another $100 on an architect and $500 to make this building? That's, let the contractor pay the deal for you. That's how all contracts are done today. I want to build a bridge, you design it, and tell me how much it's going to cost to put it up. I want to build a building, you design it. That's how the courthouse was done. It bid that way, design it, this is what we want, you design it for us, how much you're going to design and build it for us. That's what the price is. It's done. Doesn't cost the taxpayer a dime for a plan or anything. And that's, in most businesses today, that is what's happening. If you got $300,000, you probably can get a bit close to that to finish it up.
To clarify, Bud, that's where we were going, and then the whole notion of we need an engineered design has now come into the discussion, and that's where we've now taken 5 steps backwards to have a conversation about having an architectural design. That's what we're hung up on, is the architectural design. So we could have a contractor come in and say exactly what you're saying
And how much.
and how much it's gonna be. However, there's a mind set to say that we need an architectural design to say this is where this outlet's gonna go, this is where this plug's gonna go, this is what the countertop, the front counter's gonna look like, all of those details. And I don't necessarily think we have to have that.
No, do I. And you can talk to the guy.
So I think that there's a one school of thought that says architectural design, and another school of thought that says just get a contractor to come in and say, this is how much it's gonna cost.
Well, until I heard what Mr. Ween said tonight, he said you have an engineer that says this building is totally structural sound now. Just mentioned. Like, I wouldn't believe that, but I'm not an engineer, I went up and looked at it. Okay, but you have an engineer sign, that's fine. Then I think you should just ask 2 or 3 contractors to say, give us a design to do this. And then you can pick the one you like, and if you don't want this desk here, I'm sure they're gonna move it over there for you at maybe $5,000. But you can design it yourself with that contract. To apply for this, to make a motion, we're gonna get an architectural design and apply for the grant in the fall. It's gonna cost you $100,000 or whatever the quote was for an architect. And it's also gonna commit you to apply for this grant. So the building's gonna sit there for 6 months till the next grant, and it's still gonna cost you $500,000 or $600,000 when you get this grant, so why just, you can get it done for $300,000 or whatever you got. You're into it now, I think you gotta follow it through. I mean, you can't just say that, the heck of it. And if you got an engineer that says it's structural sound, like, personally me, I would not spend the money in that building, even though it made today, just me looking at it, but I'm not a builder, so.
Yeah.
But
And I think
but
that's.
if an engineer is prepared to sign it, great, you're all protected.
Yeah, he has, yeah, and I think that's the importance of, we all have to be very diligent about sticking to the facts, because, you know, if the rumor around town is that good luck walking in there, because you'll fall through the floor, then people will perceive that, you know, council's throwing money at something that's a waste of money, so.
You need to tell the people, you need to put an ad in saying, this is what we're doing. We've spent $200,000, we have an engineer decide building, design that's structurally sound. We're now gonna go, if that's what you decide to do, we're now gonna go to contractors for design and finish the interior. Tell the people.
Great.
You need to tell the people what you're doing. You're not telling the people what you're doing.
Okay, Councilor Medlock, Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. I can't support that motion that's on the floor as it reads. I think the part, what Councilor Dye was saying, we're hung up on the design part. I think what we're hung up on is sort of the criteria about what that design will look like. Like, I don't think we've had that conversation. We're still talking, how much fit and finish is it going to be? The mayor's alluded to that with this idea of different ways ahead. I think that's the conversation we need to have. The other part of the puzzle here that I want to bring up is that this rural dividend grant application that we're talking about, just applying for a later intake, I don't know that this project will even qualify for it. I mean, it's still an infrastructure heavy project in a later intake. I don't know that that's the best idea. I think we need to get creative again, figuring out other ways of applying for this grant to free up our dollars to make everything happen. I don't know that this is the best way ahead, is simply applying for infrastructure type dollars for this grant application, because it's not what the intent of this fund is for. So that we need to keep that in mind too. I don't want to focus too heavily on applying for a station house grant application in the fall. But so yeah, I can't vote in favor of that motion that's on the floor. I do want to see that conversation. What is the criteria? What is the end game? And it does need to involve Advantage Hope. They are created by council. They are the current economic development agency and tourist info center operators. There's no reason to not include them in the conversation. That's what I got to say about that for now.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Erickson.
Okay, my comment is, with this being a community building and so many people in the community interested in this building, we need to sit down as council and decide where we're going, what the building's gonna look like, and then tell somebody what to do with that building. We need to say, we need to have some drawings, because otherwise, if a community group, say Advantage Hope takes over, they need to know exactly what we want with the building. You can't just say, have one person say, I want a toilet here, and I want a sink here, and I want, we need to have it drawn out in a clear way, so when the electricians come in, the plumbers come in, whoever comes in, very clear what needs to happen. But we need to sit down with someone to have this drawn. We cannot just give it to someone and say, go fly with it, because we'll never know what happens, and there'll be disagreements all the way around, since this is a community project. If it was my project or your project, you tell people what to do and you can change on the spot. We need to have someone where we make the decisions. It's our building. Advantage Hope, or the station, tourism and the museum are going to be there. That is going to be there. Other groups will be there. We as council make the decision, because we don't know how long those groups will be there. We don't know if it, and this building will be needed down the road for maybe some other things. So we have to decide clearly where we're going with the building, and it has to have drawings. I will not agree without having some specific drawing. Otherwise, we're going to be frustrated, and there's going to be disagreements between community groups and council or whoever. It has to be clearly stated.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Leon.
Yeah, okay, it seems I'm sorry I'm late because I have to do some work in Vancouver, but anyway. I hear that one side of the table want architect drawings done, the other table want to have some cost saving initiative. And I agree with Councillor Matlock, actually, because the grant might not qualify for this, because I went to the website, I talked to Matthew, who is the grant applications manager. The ratio that we have on the infrastructure expenses might not make us qualify. So if we jump ahead and pay the architect money up front and then apply for the grant, it will be just like what Bud just said, we might just get caught at the very end. So can we, instead of applying the grant with all the infrastructure, but I know the criteria is, if we apply for the grant for the architect drawing, that's eligible for it. Because you cannot do actual work with that grant funding, but you can do the paperwork with that grant funding to leverage more funding in the future. And that's the intent of the grant. So can we revise the grant application a little bit? So we just apply for the architect drawing, and so that we can at least have the architect drawing covered by the grant applications. And then when it comes to when the second round of the grant applications happening, then we might have different things already on the table. Because by that time we should have more community engagement, just like what Donna expected or everyone want, then it's just something maybe we can reconsider. Because if we have an application here ready, can we just change it to architect drawing only? So we can offset the fees, but at the same time it fulfill the wish of some of the councillors. So.
You bring forward an interesting idea, but I think the minor problem with that is to qualify for a grant, you can't start the work you're applying for. So, like, we cannot commission any architectural drawings, renderings, engineering work and apply for it and then expect to get reimbursed for something we already started. So what that would do would probably put this thing on hold till end of August.
But I think right now the point is, but because when I make the phone call and talk to Matthew, one thing that I ask very specific is, let's say if we have I use the Silver Creek area for example, I asked them, okay, we cannot do sewer, water and road, I know that, but how about if I put in a request, or if I am trying to hire a project managers, I'm going to hire an engineer. Those are qualified. And right now in the station house, we did the engineer. But for the architect or the other things, we haven't started anything yet. So technically, we haven't started the process. So why don't we just make everybody happy? Like, the grant funding will cover the architect.
I think God himself would have a problem with that on this.
At least some people happy, and then we have something on the table. Then if the architect come back, we just need 300. Then you know what? Then we tell the architect we want a $300,000 project. Then it will be a $300,000 project. But I think right now is the point that we have to start this project and start to controlling our expectations from everybody. Because you see this project will run into the road that nobody knows what is the expectations and what is the limit that we can afford. So that's why at the end we have a $1.2 million at the end, or I hear like 900 or 700. Maybe we should set expectations, what is the max we want to spend. Get the architect come in, get with the grant applications, and tell them our expectations, and then we start the project from there.
Just ask a question.
Yes, Mrs. Kennedy.
What does an architectural drawing give you? Does it not give you a concept of what the building could look like?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that it? Okay.
That's right.
So it's, and it's, yeah, okay. So it's a design that is created by somebody else.
No, it's
Given your input, of course, given the council's input, user group inputs.
Okay.
Because I'm meeting one tomorrow at work, so basically they will tell you, okay, how you want to wire cable, even about the ceiling. Like when certain things come in, then they'll tell you, okay, if you put a panel right in front.
Actually,
yeah.
My colleague here, Mr. Dickin, had a comment.
Mr. Dickin.
Just to clarify, I mean, some architects will provide you with costs along with their drawings. However, you really don't know what the true costs are going to be until you go to market. was gonna say, further to the comment from the audience, in less than 24 hours, we wouldn't have the necessary information on the cost of an architect to move forward with amending the grant application for this intake. So that's not really a possibility at this point.
Ms. Hines?
I tend to simplify things, but if you're sick, you go to your doctor and you describe your symptoms. And then they run tests and they examine you. And then once they run the tests, then they decide if you need a specialist. So I'm listening to pros and cons about architects. And that basically is like going to the doctor who's going to order the tests so that they can find out what's wrong, and then you decide what you're going to do from there. The doctor tells you what your options are, which specialist you need to go to. And I don't understand why there's opposition to going to an architect, telling them what you want. You guys have your meeting, you have your public input. I think that it's not that people don't like the project. I myself and my husband 5 years ago volunteered up there doing pancake breakfast to keep that place afloat. My husband was hanging off of the roof painting it. Nobody hates that project, but what they want is some transparency. They want to know what is planned. They want to see. If you show them what you have planned and if you communicate that to people, you will have a whole lot more support.
Well, I think, in fairness to council and staff, we're beyond transparent, actually. It's, there's no behind-the-scenes special meetings.
Perception is everything.
Well, and some people, based on their Facebook meanderings, they quite often will, you know, take everything that's, there's some good stuff there, but there's a lot of crap there as well. So I think, you know, attending a council meeting like you're doing now, awesome. That's, then you get what council's actually doing. Reading the meeting minutes, which Wendy very ably prepares all the time. Another awesome way to you know, find out what council's doing. Or talking to a friend who attended a council meeting. But a lot of people, I think, on this project are you know, talking about what they heard at the coffee shop, or what a friend is presupposing, or a friend was a contractor in 1960 and he thinks this is just, there's a different, we got to stick to the facts. And I think we've actually done a pretty reasonable job in conveying, we've had differences of opinion. We're exploring different options. We have differences of opinion on that. That's fine. This, I don't consider this whole process unhealthy.
I'm going back to.
But an architect, to me, we decide what we want, then if necessary, we get an architect to put that in writing. We don't tell the architect we want to build. We already have a building. Putting together a tourist info center is not astrophysics. We don't have to launch a space shuttle here. This is not a really complicated procedure. So my only point, speaking as an individual, is why hire an architect if we don't need an architect? We have a structurally sound building. It needs a little tweaking. We have a very capable building inspector who's ticketed up the wazoo, a very impressive individual. So, I mean, we have a lot of in-house resources. We have good people volunteering for us that have construction background. Maybe we're not going to get $1 million end product, but we're obviously not going to spend $1 million if we get our ducks in a row here and set up panel.
I believe that you're missing part of what I said. One is perception, all right? If someone is accused of a crime, but then later on is absolved of the crime, what do people remember that person's name for? For having done the crime, for having been accused of the crime. So perception is everything. And I think if people perceived that this was a community project and that you were welcoming involvement of the individual taxpayer and the people who were going to be visiting the building, I have no problem with the building. I love the building. It's a shame that it lost its heritage value, but be that as it may. But I go back to the idea, if you don't feel well, You don't call your Aunt Mary to ask your Aunt Mary what she thinks you should do with this lump that's on your whatever part of your body. What do? You go to a doctor. Are you following me?
And not exactly, because I don't think we're sick in the first place, and.
It's an analogy,
Yeah,
that's
no,
all it
I
is. But
get
you
that.
understand, you go to an architect and you say to the architect, this is what we want, this is how we envision this. And then they make sure it's up to code in what they give you.
I get that point. I get
So
that
I
point.
don't understand, I'm just saying my piece about whether or not we should go to an architect. You don't step on dollars to pick up dimes.
Okay, now what I would respectfully suggest to council, we have a motion on the table, I don't think that motion is going to pass, let's have a vote on it. Yeah. Okay, one more.
Are you wanting to add the last piece? I don't know that was.
Would that be a friendly
add the friendly amendment? Was that talked about?
I mean, I think it's to a point where we have to have a follow-up meeting with steps forward, because obviously there's not the grant application is not going to be submitted, there's no appetite for that by the council, or the majority doesn't. I think we have to have a specialized meeting in the next couple of weeks to really flesh out where we're going here.
So read the full scope of what's being discussed so
It's not
far.
a meeting, it's not a motion.
So the full scope of everything, and then it can be scaled between. Revisit BC Rural Dividend Program grant application for the fall intake of 2016, and further ensure that it includes architectural drawings, and further that an options list be presented by the end of June outlining the process moving forward.
Yeah, I can accept the amendment.
Can we
Because
put
it makes
the
sense.
potential of it, the potential application for the fall? Because that doesn't bind council to, for sure, applying
That's why
for the
I
grant.
said to visit
Potential.
it.
Review.
Yeah,
Revisit, yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, that
It
sounds
doesn't
like-
commit you to it.
Can you also just say, it's not the architectural drawings that you need, it's mechanical drawings at this point is what you need, not architecture, you need mechanical.
Yeah.
We need it all.
You've
We-
got
we-
the
we
architectural
can-
drawings already.
We don't have the
let's-
architectural drawings.
Let's,
What do you have?
Okay, we have a motion on the table.
So this is,
yeah, that's right.
So-
But the amendment, you have my second.
yes.
Are you okay with that amendment?
So,
Okay.
yeah, Mr. Dickon is,
I just want to reiterate that I can't promise that architectural drawings would be completed by the fall application deadline. So if that's an
We might be in a different scenario by then anyways.
well, and I think, you know, Mr. Gardner's point is a good one. If we decide exactly what the final product is, let's just say, hey, we got $300,000 to work with, RFP it, and just say, hey, you know, let's see the best product, and then they'll be competing for the best quality product at the end of it.
I think, excuse me, Mr. Gold, but I think you should just ask for a design and build from 3 or 4 contractors. If it comes in $800,000, then you apply for this grant in the fall. If it comes in for $300,000, build it. You know, you got the money.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
But first, we have to decide exactly what we want. We can't.
Oh, you have to sit down.
Totally true.
That's right, you gotta sit down with the council and decide.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Bellingham?
Would it work for council if we just took out the part about the architectural drawings at this stage?
Yes.
But just at this stage, so that if we have the meeting by the end of June to outline the process moving forward, council at that time could direct on drawings or some fashion of plans?
So I would like that. I mean, from the conversation and the ways forward, perhaps architectural designs will come out of that. But I don't want to bind us by putting that in the motion, saying that it's all or nothing. That's why I don't want to vote in favor of it if it's in there. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, just saying I don't want it in there. Solid.
Because
like
if you
that.
have the meeting by the end of June, you might.
You don't know where we're
determine-
at. I don't know how we can commit to something.
Okay,
It's just an option.
okay.
Quick question of staff, would middle of June be an owner's commitment? Just putting it out there, not saying you gotta do it, just putting it out there. Okay, well, it's good to be clear, so that's
And you have
an
a council
option.
meeting on the 27th of June.
Okay, understood, yeah. Councilor Crowd.
So my discussion about the drawings, the architectural drawings, was clearly, everyone knows what that's about now. It's so that we can get a vision, a visual for everyone, for me, for you, for everyone, so that we all know what we're actually going to be spending my tax dollars on, because I wanna know. So that's really what it's all about. It doesn't have to be written in stone that it's an architectural drawing. I just wanna make sure that we don't miss out on the grant if we are going to apply for it. That's my first intention. And secondly, that we do have a drawing at the end of the day. That's what I wanna see happen.
Mr. Mayor, can I just make one last comment?
Actually, Councilor
Whether it's
Medlock's.
design, build, or what.
On the idea of the visual, we have some drawings, there may not be architectural drawings, but they're renderings. And I think, is that what you're looking for, is
Absolutely,
a
something
visual?
a little
So
more
that's, I would be
concrete.
more comfortable with that, because we have a rendering with a design of a, improved washroom facility that has already been consulted with the current user of the info center. So I think if that's what you're looking for, then I'm supportive of that.
Yes,
But not
that is what I'm looking
architectural
for.
drawings in the realm that Councilor Erickson is referring to.
So, excuse me, and we can also firm that up when we have our meetings, because clearly that's a rendering, and the final product, if we did want to design build, like what was suggested out there, which is not a bad idea at all, is certainly something that we would have a little more clarity on presenting to whomever we would.
You just
So
draw
I'm
on.
willing to remove the architectural designs from the motion then?
Yeah, I am. I think it's a good step forward, because I want to move this forward.
Would you want the rendered drawings included for the June meeting?
Yeah,
So we
that would
could
be
add
perfect.
to that section.
Perfect, yeah, that would be okay for me.
Well, I mean, we have to decide what we want. Then we have to get drawings to reflect what we
Already
want.
some out there.
Then we can move forward. We can't just go and get somebody's,
Again, Your Worship, we can work on option development that will touch on all that, and you can consider that with a little more information potentially, at a little better time, I humbly.
So our architectural drawings will not be commissioned until we have the option development meeting, till we have a meeting with council and the user groups. And then we can go from there, in the public, obviously, so.
That will take time beyond June 27th, clearly, but at least June 27th, we can come back and work on that plan together. Here are the options presented to you, you consider, and here are the potential plans to make any of those options viable.
Sorry, excuse me.
If this was a birth, there'd be lots of labor pains, let me
Excuse me.
tell you. Okay, Councilor Daible?
Thank
and,
you. So I just need to be clear, because I'm not in favor of a motion that speaks to architectural designs. So I'm much more wanting to see us sit down, as you said, John, about talking about what's the vision, what's the purpose of the building, who's the user groups, bring everybody together and say, this is what we want. Then we can go back and we can say, either A, we need an architectural design, or we need a contractor to come in and build what we want. I think that that's where I'm comfortable moving to. So the way the motion reads now, I would not be in favor of that unless Donna wants to amend that.
Well, I think we can just defeat the motion, throw the pressure on, and resume life if that's.
Just not apply for the grant this round.
That's right.
That's all you need to say. We're not gonna apply.
Well, we just won't apply to them.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we have a motion on the floor, we have to defeat it if you don't like that one, and let's hear another one. See if it goes.
Okay. Question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion fails. Okay. Fresh motion, new and improved. Potential.
Can I simplify it?
Yeah.
I make a motion
Simple is
simply
good.
to not apply for the, grant, like, there was previously a motion that was approved to carry forward the grant application for Station House. That was moved, seconded, approved, and that's where we're at today. So can I just simply write a motion, or state a motion that we do not apply?
At this time.
Period, at this time, for this intake? Do not apply for this intake.
Okay.
Okay, move seconded.
Second.
All those in favor? Now, let's schedule suggestion, see if there's appetite for council. Under the subject of option development, we have a special, say, hour-long committee meeting with council, tail end of June, option development meeting. And specialize it for this purpose, maybe before a council meeting or a special evening if council desires. and then we can decide on steps forward. Because if we're not all on the same page, we
Questions? So, we're gonna, just to clarify this for me, so we are going to have a meeting. Council's going to make some decisions, recommendations, then staff's gonna come back with some options, or how's that working?
Well, I think staff will give us a few options based on our discussion tonight, and then we can have a focused discussion, because if there's 3 options based on our discussion tonight, at a committee meeting, we can have that hour-long, or hour-and-a-half long, or 2-hour-long committee meeting, ratified at a council meeting and move forward. And it's still not gonna please everyone.
Just to that, how's staff gonna make their decisions on the 3 plans that they wanna come forward with if we don't give them a way of where we're going, or where we're heading, or where Advantage Hope wants to go, or anything like that? We need to have that meeting first before we take the 3 options in.
That's right. Yeah, we don't wanna.
But I think we've had,
We don't know what we wanna do with that building. We do not know what we wanna do with that building, so how can we make a decision as council, or give staff, waste their time on giving us options if we do not know what we wanna do with that building? That's the piece of the puzzle we have to do right now.
Well, let's do that in 2 weeks then.
Your worship, why don't we prepare a draft consultation plan in reference to this? And then we'll speak to that at the next time you put this in the agenda then. As opposed to definite option development, which of course would be, we're envisioned to be fairly wide, but we're prepared to do that, and we can put a list of the stakeholder groups, the public obviously that may have an interest in this project, and then council can decide on the consultation phase in order to get more confidence in how you're moving forward.
So that obviously won't entail an onerous amount of staff work, so that would be for the next council meeting, I would assume.
Yeah, we want to do that.
Because council will be doing the majority of the head scratching on that. I guess Councillor Smith would be moving that, I would assume? Okay, we have a
I'll
second?
second that.
Councillor Crowe seconding? Motion's on the table, all those in favor? Okay, well, that's good. The next council meeting will have some.
Donna, can you read that motion?
It's too late.
I know.
We called it. I know.
What was
I
it?
think we're just getting tired now.
The council's gonna have a consultation at its own, just council.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I agree with that.
And then we
Just
go-
council, then we can get the user groups.
That's right,
Okay.
that's right.
That sounds good.
That's exactly right.
No,
Well.
they're gonna engage what we're doing first.
We'll have a discussion at the next council meeting anyway, so that'll be good.
Okay.
Is anyone keen on extending the meeting beyond?
Nope.
Anyone be amenable to a motion to adjourn?
Question.
Yeah, questions?
A question about the letters of support to other people applying for this grant, so I don't know if I should go there or not, but that point was brought up, and that's a good valid point, if we're no longer applying for this CDA. Would we not want to support others in the community that are, do you know if anybody is currently applying? And if there's a second one, we're making the assumption that there's still an opportunity for us if somebody else was successful in the first intake, right?
Your worship, through you, Councillor Medlock, I know of only one other organization in town, which is the golf club.
They're the only one that asked for a letter of support.
The Arts Girls as well. Arts
I can call them first thing in the morning, perhaps.
Arts Council, the Hope Mountain Center.
Well, they were partners on ours, on this application. As for a reduction in chance for approval, if we go to the next round, that's potentially the case. Usually the first round is the biggest round, and everyone goes for the biggest ring on the first round.
So I guess clarity, that Councilor Medlock brings forward a good point. Clarity would be important on this, because if I'm approached, I don't want to do something that's not the wish of council. What would be the wish of council in this regard? I mean, I think, to be fair, if we provide a letter of support to one, it's got to be to all.
Right.
It has to be essentially generic, we're for community development, yeehaw. It can't be a very project-specific letter of support, because, you know, we can't pick and choose who we support, because the majority of community groups here are pretty vibrant and worthwhile and so on and so forth, so we don't want to play favorites.
See, I'd be obviously in favor of supporting any other group that's applying for grants, so long as it doesn't limit our opportunities to apply at a further intake. I don't know if we have any way of getting clarification on that tomorrow from the granting agency, is if there was a successful candidate of the first intake, is there still opportunity on the second? We don't know that, do we?
Again, I would suggest respectfully, your worship, that every community is basically gonna get at least one project, ideally, approved through the Rural Dividend Fund, through all the intakes. So the potential does stand that if we support others, we may in fact reduce our chances.
I think I have to back up on that.
So then, I would assume based on that, there would be no letters of support, if that's indeed the case.
You recall, it's $75 million over 3 years. That's it.
Can we get clarification somehow? To see if it will affect us or not before we say, no, we're not gonna do anything for anybody else?
It would only make sense that it would, but we can double check.
I can provide an email conversation that I had, and I believe emailed that, but I'll resend.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
That would be
awesome.
great, thanks.
I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I adjourn.
Yeah.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Thank you all for coming.